Welcome back to WION World is One. You're watching Speed News with me, Vidur Kathuria. Let's get started. Ukraine says it has reached a common understanding with the US on a 28-point peace plan aimed at ending the war with Russia. American and Ukrainian officials worked on the plan during weekend talks in Geneva, and President Donald Trump said it has been fine-tuned with input from both sides. Trump has directed his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow next week. Some major issues, including territorial settlements, remain unresolved. The Kremlin has said Russia has not yet been consulted on the new draft and may reject amendments to the original plan. Russia says it has launched massive strikes on Ukraine's energy and defense infrastructure using Kinzhal, hypersonic missiles and other long-range weapons following Ukrainian attacks. Moscow claimed its forces advanced in parts of Krasnoarmeysk and destroyed tanks and armored vehicles while intercepting more than 100 drones. Ukraine reported widespread power outages in Kyiv, Odessa and other regions, with damage to residential and civilian facilities. President Zelensky said repair crews are working to restore electricity. Ukraine also said its forces struck strategic targets inside Russia, including an aircraft repair plant and an oil refinery. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer told a coalition of the willing meeting that the UK is ready to move with the European Union on a plan to fund Ukraine using the value of frozen Russian assets. Starmer said doing so would send the strongest signal to Vladimir Putin that negotiation, not waiting out the West, is the only path forward. He added that EU teams are working around the clock with leaders expected to take up the issue in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, Ukraine says it supports the broad framework of a potential peace deal with Russia, but insists key sensitive issues must be resolved in a meeting between President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Donald Trump. A police-escorted convoy carried what are believed to be the remains of a hostage to Tel Aviv's Forensic Institute, with officers aligning the route in salute. Israel says Palestinian militants handed the remains to the Red Cross, though it's still unclear whether they belong to one of the three hostages still held in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says the remains will undergo forensic testing for identification. It's the latest handover under last month's fragile ceasefire, a truce that is held despite both sides accusing the other of violations. The UN Human Rights Office says at least 127 civilians, including 11 children, have been killed in Lebanon since the November 2024 ceasefire. 6 others were injured in an Israeli strike on a Palestinian refugee camp near Sidon. The UN called for a detailed investigation into the attack for possible violations of international humanitarian law and emphasized that the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah must be fully respected. US military activity in the Caribbean is escalating tensions with Venezuela, as new footage from Puerto Rico shows aircraft taking off and landing at the former Roosevelt Roads naval base. The deployments include KC-130J, F-35B fighter jets and an AC-130 gunship. According to US officials, the operations are linked to a new phase of preparations concerning Venezuela. Washington has also increased its regional presence, deploying an aircraft carrier and warships for anti-drug missions. Since September, US forces have conducted about 20 airstrikes on suspected trafficking vessels, with Dominican authorities seizing over 500 kgs of cocaine in joint operations. Supporters of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro marched through Caracas in a civic military police mobilization led by Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello to defend the national flag and sovereignty. The march follows Washington's designation of Venezuela's Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization, with sanctions targeting Maduro and other senior officials. Caracas called the move ridiculous, accusing the US of seeking control over the country's oil and gas. In recent months, the US has stepped up operations against suspected drug trafficking vessels off Venezuela's coast. Brazil's Supreme Court has made ex-President Jair Bolsonaro's coup conviction final, ending all chances of appeal and clearing the way to begin serving a 27-year prison sentence. Bolsonaro was found guilty in September of plotting to stop Lula da Silva from taking office after the 2022 election, a scheme prosecutors say even involved an assassination plan. He's been ordered to serve his time at federal police headquarters in Brasilia. Despite the ruling, his lawyer says a new appeal will still be filed. Supporters have gathered outside the facility, while inside, Bolsonaro to remain isolated in a 12-square-meter room with basic amenities. China's top foreign affairs official Wang Yi met with Malaysia's National Security Council chief to strengthen ties between the two countries. Wang said China aims to align development strategies, deepen political and security cooperation, and expand practical collaboration. Malaysia's Nushirwan, attending a bilateral dialogue on South China Sea maritime issues, emphasized Malaysia's commitment to the One China policy and said Kuala Lumpur will actively advance key cooperation projects across multiple sectors. Thousands of protesters marched through central Madrid to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Demonstrators carried signs, chanted, and played drums along Atocha Street, calling attention to gender-based violence. So far in 2025, 38 women in Spain have been killed by partners or former partners. Since 2003, a total of 1,333 women have lost their lives. This is according to the Equality Ministry. The United Nations officially recognized November 25th in 2000 to raise awareness and promote action against violence towards women. Feminist group New Tooth gathered outside the Pantheon in Paris, highlighting the continued rise in femicides and gender-based violence in France. Organizers said 152 femicides have been recorded so far this year, up from 141 last year. Activists displayed a 20-meter banner listing 1,183 women and girls killed since May 2017 and projected messages onto the Pantheon's facade. A member of the feminist group emphasized that violence against women and children remains pervasive, urging that femicide be formally defined in the French Penal Code, backed by an annual €3 billion budget and accompanied by a parliamentary inquiry into institutional shortcomings. Protesters gathered in Istanbul to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, marching along the busy Istiklal Avenue under heavy police presence. Demonstrators chanted the names of victims of gender-based violence. In Turkey, about half of the murders of women remain unresolved, and previous years' marches have often faced heavy-handed policing and multiple arrests. Activists used the demonstration to call for justice and stronger protection for women. Hundred marched in Mexico City to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Protesters moved along the Reforma Avenue to the city center, holding signs reading "Stop Misogynist Insults" and messages from women affected by gender-based violence. Mexico recorded 852 femicides and 3,739 female homicides in 2024. The march follows recent incidents, including an attack on President Claudia Sheinbaum, and highlights ongoing efforts such as the 2021 Olympia law addressing digital violence and sexual privacy violations. Myanmar's military government has stepped up its crackdown on online scam centers as the multi-billion-dollar criminal network continues operating along the country's borders. Security forces have raided massive compounds, detained workers, and demolished buildings linked to cyber fraud. Authorities say the push responds to international pressure after reports that Myanmar had become a hub for scams, including romance cons and fake investment schemes, generating nearly $40 billion a year. The latest raid has resulted in the detention of over 1,700 foreigners in 6 days. Jakarta has banned the sale and consumption of dog, cat and bat meat to curb the spread of rabies. The city's governor announced businesses have 6 months to comply, after which violators could face penalties including warnings and loss of licenses. The ban covers live animals, meat and processed products targeting species known to transmit rabies. Animal rights groups welcome the move as a step towards protecting animals, while authorities said it also aligns Jakarta with international welfare standards. The ban follows 25 rabies-related deaths in Indonesia in the first quarter of the year. India's External Affairs Ministry has strongly condemned China for detaining an Indian citizen from Arunachal Pradesh at Shanghai International Airport. Prema Wangchom Thongdok, holding a valid Indian passport, was held for 18 hours while transiting from the UK to Japan. Indian officials called the detention arbitrary, emphasizing that Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India and criticizing China for violating both international air travel conventions and its own 24-hour visa-free transit rules. China had claimed the state as part of its territory, prompting India to take up the issue strongly with Beijing. Israel has responded after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu postponed his planned visit in December to India following a bomb blast near New Delhi's Red Fort. In a social media post, Israel said the bond between the two countries and between Netanyahu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi remains very strong. The statement added that Netanyahu has full confidence in India's security and that both sides are already working to set a new date for the visit. A hailstorm has battered southern Brazil, injuring at least 246 people and causing widespread damage. In the city of Erechim in Rio Grande do Sul, hailstones tore through roofs and vehicles, affecting over 10,000 families. Civil defense teams, firefighters, military brigades, and volunteers have been working to assess and clear the damage in the aftermath of the storm. A fast-moving tornado tore through the Memorial Northwest neighborhood of Spring, Texas, leaving more than 100 homes damaged. Harris County officials confirmed the tornado touched down north of Houston, with residents surveying down trees and debris across the community. Even though winter officially begins next month, a wintry storm hit the northern U.S., bringing snow to North Dakota and South Dakota. According to the National Weather Service, by late Tuesday afternoon, some areas reported up to 8 inches of snow. In North Dakota, icy roads and low visibility forced officials to close sections of Interstates 94 and 29 after multiple accidents. Travelers were warned to exercise caution as the storm continues to affect the region. Kilauea volcano has erupted again in Hawaii, with lava fountains reaching about 400 feet. This is according to footage from the US Geological Survey. Ash and smoke were seen blowing into the sky as one of the world's most active volcanoes continued its activity. This marks the 37th eruption of the volcano since December 2024. The USGS confirmed all activity is confined to Halemaumau crater within Hawaii's Volcanoes National Park, and commercial airports in Hawaii County, including Koa and Ito, remain unaffected. Artificial intelligence server maker Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, or HPE, announced that it has won a $931 million contract from a combat support agency of the US Department of Defense for providing cloud services for its data centers. The contract to HPE, aimed at creating a cloud environment to improve outcomes for warfighters, underscores federal confidence in the company's cloud capabilities as the government accelerates efforts to modernize infrastructure, investing billions in AI and signing contracts with leading industry players. TikTok has named former Boeing government affairs chief Ziad Ojakli as the short video app's head of public policy for the Americas as it works to complete a deal to separate its US assets from its parent company. The move comes as TikTok's Chinese owner, ByteDance, is working to sell about an 80% stake in the short video app, US assets, to a consortium of US and global investors to meet the national security requirements set out in a 2024 law. His appointment is aimed at bolstering the company's engagement with US policymakers, ensuring compliance with local regulations, and guiding the company through a high-stakes asset divestment process. Dutch public broadcaster NOS has stopped posting on Elon Musk's social media platform X, citing concerns over disinformation and hateful content. NOS said that the platform no longer aligned with its vision for presenting news on social media. The broadcaster, with 2.4 million followers on X, will continue news updates on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and WhatsApp. NOS also plans to strengthen fact-checking efforts before sharing news on any social platform. Asian markets climbed on Wednesday, tracking Wall Street gains after weaker than expected US economic data boosted hopes of a Fed rate cut. Japan's Nikkei surged 1.8%, while Asia Pacific Index outside Japan rose 1%. Australian shares added 0.7% and US stocks futures edged higher, signaling a positive start for regional markets as investor sentiment improved across equities. Oil prices steadied on Wednesday after sliding on Tuesday as Ukraine indicated readiness to advance a US-backed peace plan, potentially easing Western sanctions on Moscow's energy exports. Brent crude rose 0.3% to $62, recovering from a 5-week low, while European energy prices hovered at their lowest in a year and a half. OPEC Plus is expected to keep output levels unchanged in its upcoming meeting, supporting supply stability in the market. Australia's consumer prices rose 3.8% in October, the fastest pace in 7 months and above economists' 3.6% forecast, as the housing sector drove higher costs in electricity, rents, and new dwellings. Electricity prices alone surged 37.1% after households exhausted government rebates. Food, recreation, and culture also added to the inflation, while trimmed meal measure climbed to 3.3%. On a monthly basis, headline CPI was flat. Meanwhile, business conditions improved to their highest level since March 2024, supporting the Reserve Bank of Australia's cautious approach to further interest rate cuts. India and Pakistan have once again been drawn into the same group for an ICC tournament. The two teams, who now only meet in multi-nation events, are set to face off on February 15th at the 2026 T20 World Cup. The marquee event will be co-hosted by India and Sri Lanka. India enter the tournament as defending champions. The clash in Colombo will be their first World Cup meeting since their 3 fiery encounters at the Asia Cup, all of which were won by India. Those Asia Cup matches also mark their first on-field meeting since a border confrontation between the nuclear-armed neighbours in May. The much-anticipated film Ramayan is aiming to set new global standards for VFX and virtual production. Director Naresh Tiwari said at the WAVE Summit that the team spent 5 years on motion capture, world building and cutting-edge tech with prime focus. The first part of Nitesh Tiwari's Ramayan arrives Diwali 2026, followed by part 2 in Diwali 2027. That's it on this edition of Speed News. News and updates will continue on the other side of the short break. Keep watching me on World is One.